the ACT-IAC IoT Smart Community, Smart City Working Group. Welcome, we're glad you're here. Today we have a great presentation. Dr. Herman DeBoard is joining us, who'll share some information about data. Not that, that's not at the top of your mind, but hopefully this will be insightful and helpful. Once again, we're an emerging tech group sponsored by ACT-IAC. If we have any ACT-IAC folks on, I'm happy to have them share what's taking place. If not, feel free to check out their website. And with no further ado, I want to introduce my co-lead and government chair, Sam Navarro, who's going to kick us off today. Sam, take it away.
Thank you, Don, and thank you for everyone attending us. And just FYI, we are recording this session to drive as much equity as we can for folks who are busy out and about, but definitely can leverage the conversation, right, to continue propelling government to the next level. So first and foremost, want to introduce myself. I'm Sam Navarro. I am the Client Services Director for the Centers of Excellence here in GSA. And our objective, kind of like the objective of this working group, is to drive modernization, drive innovation across government through the centers of excellence that we have. Over 21 centers of excellence across government, doing everything from infrastructure modernization to cloud migrations, even AI implementations across government. And so definitely we thank the folks that have put in a lot of time and effort to make this happen. Dr. Herman, who's here with us, Herman DeBoard, who's here with us and spending time out of his calendar to share a little bit of what he's doing within the data aggregation space. And so what are we doing here, right? We stood up this IoT working group under the emerging technology community of interest because there's a lot of use cases across government. DoD just tested around 250 technical concepts of IoT solutions that can work within the defense space. And we're seeing that kind of expand to the civilian space, right? And what's IoT? It's an opportunity to put a lot of sensors, whether in a building, or as Pete says, in a city, or in a footprint, right? That drives a lot of data in order for humans to make informed decisions. And a lot of times we forget about a lot of the things that go into the secret recipe, not just the sensors and the infrastructure and the devices, but we forget about some of the things that go into the recipe to then aggregate and turn that data into information and knowledge that we can use to make decisions. So we hopefully want to drive that conversation, hopefully to the next level today. And I am 100% sure we've heard a lot of great things about Herman DeBoard on this topic, that you guys are going to get something out of it today. So thank you everyone for participating. We look forward to the dialogue. And now I'll turn it over to Pete. Thank you, Dr. Board, for being here once again, taking time out of your schedule to just give us a little tidbit and some nuggets, hopefully, that we can take away from this conversation. And definitely happy to see some of the faces we have here today. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Pete, the man with the plan, and we'll kick it off.
Thank you, Sam. I am wonderful, wonderful intro. We're so excited to have Sam Navarro as one of our government co-chairs, Mike Burkholz from the General Services Administration as well, along with Don and the wonderful leadership emanating from Todd Hager and Anil Chaudhry. And of course, thank you, ACT-IAC, for giving us this chance. Hey, everybody, you know the deal here. Our audience is government, industry, public, private. We are recording, and what we like to do here in a nutshell is feature and celebrate thought leadership, be that in government or in industry. Dr. Herman DeBoard, yes, Dr. Herman DeBoard hails from the wonderful Marshall University. What's their nickname, Herman? Is it Thundering Herd or something?
Thundering Herd, yes.
I love it. There's a great movie, and Randy Moss, that whole thing. Chad Pennington was a quarterback for my Miami Dolphins. So noodle arm aside, I'm a big fan of the Thundering Herd. But look, folks, we're gonna have our dialogue. This is a storytelling, sharing information. I could tell you that Herman, who's going to give a little more background on himself and his passion, his professional and personal journey to create an organization known as Huvr, and its solution set is doing something as simple as providing a bird's eye view of our world. And what does that mean? It means everything from data collection, aggregation, curation, cloud services, but really giving folks an optic who might not have the opportunity to hop on a plane, or frankly, if it's just a nuisance, to see things. And I want you to truly see things, but understand that there's the component of personal opportunity to visit another country. And then when we think of our nation's critical infrastructure sectors, leveraging IoT devices to do 24/7 monitoring of the very infrastructure that our cities, communities, and municipalities need to stay resilient and reliable, to Sam's point earlier. So there is a smart cities component to it. So with that, we encourage our audience and to throw in a question on the chat, but we are going to have this available for folks who can't make it today. So Herman, with that, I'm not going to read the bio, but Herman is also a veteran of our military. So thank you for your service first and foremost. Talk a little bit about you, your pedigree, but Herman, how it's informed your passion.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I started out in the U.S. Air Force. I was stationed at Pope Air Force Base during the Gulf War. Had quite a few opportunities for medals along the way that was earned. Got out of the Air Force, went back to college. That's when I finished my master's degree and my PhD. But the whole time I was working for the government. So, I started out in state government. I was part of group building immunization information systems back in the, I would call it the mid to late 90s. And then from there, I went on to be a program manager at the CDC, transferred out to Schriever Air Force Base, where I was chief of communication out here in Colorado. I've been here for about 20 years now. From Schriever, transferred over to Fort Carson, where I was director of technology there for a while. And then I jumped out and started my journey as an entrepreneur. I started, helped a friend start a mutual fund company. And from there, I kind of had, I had a passion for building companies. And so, once I helped a friend do that, I started my own technology companies. And, my goal in life has always been to find what I call meaningful gaps in a marketplace and try to build technology around it that benefits people in some way. And so that's where, I ended up here with Huvr.
Well, let me build off that. And for those of us that love the tweetable moments, meaningful gaps, I love it. I also know that Sam and I talk quite often about the government and industry. It's one thing for government to have the time to seek out companies that can help solve mission-specific challenges. And there's a gap there, right? Some people call it the valley of death. Other people just call it, look, there's just never enough time in the day. We're hoping, again, for you to expose some of the kind of use cases you're doing with obviously places like DIU and SOCOM and other things that are exciting that other agencies can leverage. So thank you for that intro, but also, that understanding that you have this internal passion and understand the government domain. Talk a little bit about Huvr and what it does and what makes it unique.
Yeah, I'll give you the backstory. I mean, this was late 2019, pre-pandemic. Actually, I was watching the movie Avatar, and it's about the disabled veteran that gets in the pod and was teleporting into another civilization. And I just thought, why can't we do that? I mean, we have technology. So I got with a couple friends of mine that are tech guys, and we built an MVP. And so the idea was virtual teleportation. So without knowing someone in another country, could you literally pick up your mobile device, select a country, select a person that's there, and teleport into that person? So you could literally walk around. You could hear what they hear. You could see what they see. And you could talk to them and guide them around to view whatever you wanted to view at the time. And so we got that up and running in about 15 countries. And obviously the pandemic hit in 2020 and carried on through 2021. And we got this all built and launched during the pandemic, which was quite an accomplishment. And so 15 countries in, we had tested everything, and it got really, really fun, actually. You know, we had Greece up and running, we had places in Italy up and running, Portugal, Brazil, different places in Australia. And you could literally just open the app and teleport into a place and see what was going on. And so, you know, from there, it kind of grew to where we are right now, into we started getting requests from organizations, mainly colleges and universities to begin with. But we started getting requests from those people they wanted to use the platform themselves. They loved the idea that they could use it for, you know, letting their students teleport into different places, but they wanted to use it for allowing potential students to teleport into the university so that they could see some micro tours of what's going on, and maybe get a little more engaged with the university and potentially become a student. So we did a little bit of a shift at that point, and we got our developers to turn our platform that we still run into a SaaS platform, so that any organization could basically have their own agnostic virtual services platform. And so, you know, what we mean by agnostic is it doesn't matter what your virtual services are. Is it an event? Is it a person? You know, what is that virtual event? That's completely up to you. And then you also, that's the big differentiator is, you know, again, we want to fill those gaps that we find, is that we found that the existing platforms that were out there that were allowing you to do things like we're doing now, which is just a Zoom meeting, it was very difficult to get meaningful data off of it. And so we started building in the idea that, hey, if you're going to license the SaaS platform from us, you should own your data. You should own the geospatial, the facial, the audio, the video. You should own everything, the timestamps, anything that happens to happen during your virtual event. You should be able to own the data. And I'll just leave it there for now. See if you have.
Well, and Herman, and by the way, Sam, feel free to jump in if you have a question. But more importantly, I love what you just shared. And Herman, we're here to listen. So, you know, riff away, my friend. But I do like to interject for anybody. And I always think if it's my mom watching this, it's like I'm hearing, look, the pandemic happened. It touched the world. And whether you look at, well, it's remote this, remote that, government moved to a lot of virtual events. A lot of people don't want to have to commute anymore. Some businesses want people back at the desk. But the beautiful thing, and Herman, we've talked about this leading up to today, virtual communications have morphed, evolved, and improved. There was a time where I think, Sam, you can relate. Hey, I'm going to work remote today. And then it was basically email and maybe a VPN if they had enough seats for you to, but now it's this. Got rid of the snow days for a lot of my kids, but that sucks for them. But the idea of teleportation, remote work, what things happen, and then we see how technology evolves. I love also this educational component, and we'll get into some of that because we think of virtual learning, distance learning. It's not just sitting in the classroom anymore. It's seeing somebody walking the streets of maybe the university and city that I am going to get in the car and drive with my son and spend, 3 days doing, when somebody could be like, oh, over here's the community center. Or maybe, so I want people to visualize what Huvr is outside of all the wonderful AI and algorithms and cloud and SaaS solution that it is. But man, Herman, I'm looking forward to hearing about Huvr Africa and some of these other use cases. So thank you. And again, I like to always correlate back to the administration. And hey, on October 11th, the Biden-Harris administration announced key actions to advance tech accountability and protect the protect the rights of the American public. It's called the Blueprint for a Bill of Rights. But if you really dive into it, it speaks to automated technologies are increasingly used to make everyday decisions affecting people's rights, opportunities, and access in everything from hiring and housing to healthcare to education and financial services. That, to me, is a bedrock for why looking at a tool like this could be incredibly valuable, not only meeting some compliance, but moving the needle for government. So thank you. And let's go into that. Why don't you give us, talk a little bit about Huvr Africa program. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, Huvr Africa came about as we were talking to some different colleges and universities. essentially where that went is, once you build a tool like this, it's really only as good as the users themselves. So when the clients come in, they always say, well, can we use it for blank? And so we just have to say, look, we've built this tool, and we like to call it an agnostic tool. And essentially, you can, like the use cases the colleges initially came up with was student acquisition. They wanted to send out 300,000 emails to say, hey, you can take a micro tour of our science facility and speak directly to the one of these professors, and it's led by students. And so it was really an engaging type of deal to get students engaged. Then they morphed into, okay, now we want to get our alumni engaged, because the alumni aren't really responding to the letters and magazines we're sending out. So now they can log in and they can get, they hover in and get micro tours of a basketball coach, a new basketball coach, or the new dean of liberal arts, or whatever that might happen to be. And so from there, it morphed into these, what they're referring to as diplomacy programs, and then furthering and augmenting the classroom, basically. So the diplomacy programs we're basically like, we are sending students to Africa, and we want them to learn about government and business, and we want them to be ambassadors in other countries, but we were focusing on Africa at the time. And so that diplomacy program kind of opened up this idea of, a lot of people don't travel to Africa. I mean, we just put out a press release last week about the Huvr Africa program. And that led to another one of our board members. He's Dr. Ted Reynolds at University of Central Florida. And he is basically trying to help us build the cultural anthropology program that will connect colleges and universities to different parts of Africa. And again, it's when you look at the traveling to Africa, it's not easy. It's not cheap. It's not a lot of people don't consider travel safe anymore. Then once you get there, you have the idea of keeping yourself safe in an area where you're unfamiliar. And so, when you start looking at the idea of traveling to 30 plus countries in the continent of Africa, it starts to get a little daunting. And so some of the universities we had spoken to said, we started out small. We started out and said the African-American studies courses that they're taking, most of those students will never have the opportunity to travel to Africa. They're just going to watch videos that are curated online. They're going to look at pictures, and that's just going to be how it is. Well, we started looking at that and said, wait, if we started partnering with the right government organizations, we could actually create a program where colleges and high schools could absolutely connect to the culture, the business, the tourism areas of different parts of Africa. And you could actually hover in live and control what you're seeing when you're seeing it. You start to save these videos on your own. So it's like you're taking your own little pilgrimage throughout the continent. And we believe that program is going to end up growing to Huvr Europe and Huvr India and Huvr Asia, and it's going to grow. We just we want to get this program grown properly first. Well, that ended up growing into, we started talking to the Defense Innovation Unit, DIU, and they introduced us to a company called Scale AI. And Scale AI, they looked at us and said, wow, you're essentially a data producer. So you guys are producing video, audio, you're producing geospatial data. We're producing all sorts of data, but we're not really putting it to use other than for educational or entertainment purposes. So Scale then looks at us and says, okay, what if we take and connect into your data, we create AI programs around it, and now we can make that data more beneficial for agencies and schools and different things like that. So now we've got this connection where we are essentially IoT devices, where we do have cameras in the field, and it's human to human right now. But if you look at our roadmap, we're very quickly, our modality collection points are moving from human to human into a static camera collection point, which would be like a camera that's stationed on a tower somewhere on a building. And then that's moving to drone technology, unmanned aerial systems, where we're going to have, our engineers are working on 4-inch micro drones, and you'll be able to get on our app, select, Rwanda, or select Tanzania, or wherever you're selecting, and that drone will be available, and then you can access that camera feed it will go up and down. You'll be able to literally log in live and see that. So with having the three forms of modality, when you have human to human, human to static, and human to drone, we're really accomplishing our mission, which is initially was to open the world to everyone, no matter what your economic status was, no matter what your fear level was. We want the world to be available to everyone. And I think that, gradually we are accomplishing that. And we're starting with this Huvr Africa program.
So first of all, pilgrimage, open the world to everyone. I love it. And I think, Sam, you and I talk quite a bit about a lot of this administration's focus on climate, right? And environmental impact and what happens when disasters occur. Natural, we'll use in this case. We see loss of life. We see the opportunity to innovate, to build a more robust power grid. And let me just say to the audience that, Herman brought up things like tourism and entertainment and education, which are, when you really think about it, so legit. I just spent time earlier this year in Portland at a big energy conference. Getting out there was a hassle. It was a great time to be there, but getting there with one flight and then sitting in an airport for 12 hours because there weren't enough workers, right? Remember all this travel earlier in the year and this issue. Those have to be factored in, and that's lost time when we can maybe take advantage of these types of use cases. Now, on the entertainment, tourism side, and education, I'm also bringing it back to my world, and Sam, I think you can relate. You heard me mention earlier about critical infrastructure, folks, in government, the 16 sectors that our nation define as most critical. And we use them every day: energy, manufacturing, water, wastewater. You hear me preach about this because these are the things we need. We flip a light on, we want the light to come on, the switch. We expect our water to be clean. We expect our roads to be safe and potholes to be filled, potholes. So, and oh, by the way, the bipartisan infrastructure law and $1.2 trillion injected into the economy are addressing a lot of those needs. Huvr, though, think about this: real-time maintenance operations, real-time IG inspections. Now, I'm speaking to that government world of, we got human beings who nobody's being pushed out of work. But when a substation, in my case, is having some issues and somebody has to travel through rural America to take some inspections, visual, or a railroad, which is how we do it, we can leverage that in addition to automated technologies. And given your reference to enriching the data with AI, it fits right in, right, Sam, to what we're trying to do in our country. So think of other mission and specific, use cases. We talked about cultural anthropology, exploring disaster response sites, providing first responders with what they're stepping into before they have to go in. So that's technology enabling what the human being still needs to make those decisions, because we still got the most powerful computer in the world in our brains. So Sam, do you have any comments? Just wanted to give you the mic for a minute on what you're hearing.
No, yeah, definitely incredible use case. When you talk about a footprint of an IoT solution, I don't think you could get any broader than global right now. And Herman, I know that part of the Infrastructure Act that Pete just talked about was addressing bridging the digital divide. One aspect of at least our country, and I'm pretty sure it's a challenging in other countries as well, is getting broadband access out to areas that are outside of cities and municipalities. And so my question to you is, how have you guys grappled with challenges where probably we don't have high speed broadband, wireless broadband access? Are there alternative technologies that can be leveraged from your experience? From an infrastructure perspective, do you have just a little bit of insight, right? Because I think it's pretty straightforward if you want to give people an experience in Manhattan, New York, right? Or in Washington, DC. But what about in the fields of Iowa, right? Or in Ohio, in the middle of a potato field, right? You know, how can you give the same immersive experience of a farmer as you can a taxi driver in a metropolitan area?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we've been following some developmental footprints of other technology companies, so we can kind of get on their coattails and kind of ride the wave. And what I mean by that is, you've got the 5G footprint. Before that, you had 4G. We can actually operate in a 3G environment as far as cell signal goes. And so when you look at overlaying cell signal with broadband, as long as there is some sort of signal, we can absolutely operate. So we haven't had a lot of issues in the United States, but when you start to look overseas, you do start to get some issues. So in some cities, for example, like when we were in Portugal, there were some parts of the city that didn't have any sort of cell connection or any sort of mobile connection. So if you walked through that dead zone, you lost connection. So we've been doing a lot of testing like that. We're also following Starlink very closely because we're watching as Starlink rolls out, they are going to open up the world to connectivity. And so as we can follow their footprint as well, we can overlay that onto our maps. When looking at Africa, I mean, you can look at some of the poorest areas. I mean, even Madagascar has a 5G location, believe it or not. There are people who have interest in putting that there. And so there's about 7 cell and broadband providers that are major providers in Africa. And so, as they follow their footprint, they start with major cities and they start to expand from there. And then we can look at, right now, Starlink is not in Africa at all, but they are throughout Europe. And so, we can look at India and Europe and Asia, who has a little bit better footprint. But we wanted to start with really what is kind of the hardest area, which is no connectivity in many, many geographic miles throughout the continent of Africa. But in the US, we haven't had that many problems in the US because we can go, if you don't have broadband or you don't have Wi-Fi, as long as you have at least a 3G signal on your mobile device, you can interact.
Quick point, and just to build on that, thank you. First of all, Sam, great question for bridging the, again, bipartisan infrastructure law, $1.2 trillion. It's not a government agency thing. It is truly, our tax dollars going to build up or modernize, transform our crumbling infrastructure. So transportation, energy, environment, and broadband, Pete Tseronis likes to say, those are pillars. You need underpinning communications, broadband, Starlink, if you have never heard of it, starlink.com. It's high-speed, low-latency broadband internet in remote and rural locations across the globe. An incredible program that clearly will hopefully enable the communications to be deployed so that we can take advantage of, for the geeks out there, the OSI model. There's the physical layer, and then there's, of course, the application. This isn't a plug and play. A lot has to work in order for, in the case, Herman, I think you mentioned, whether it's micro drones, taking pictures. Sam, you brought up a great point regarding, the Midwest. Like, think of the U.S. Department of Agriculture folks, right? Sam mentioned here on the East Coast, we got more Wi-Fi than we need. But then there are places where farmers, auto manufacturers, some of our power marketing administrations, government-owned utilities that serve rural parts of our country. When you get into this bias, if you will, or certain cities, certain socio or societies having access to technology, this is that whole point of the underserved and unserved. And I want to read something again from that Bill of Rights blueprint that has been released, again, October 11th of this year. One of the points it makes is how AI, artificial intelligence, can display opportunities unequally or embed bias and discrimination in decision-making processes. As a result, automated systems can replicate or deepen those inequalities already present in society against ordinary people. So technology, good, bad, or indifferent, can do a lot to inform us. But the reality is, and this is where it goes back to Herman, maybe back to you, like, there's a lot that goes into providing this service. And I think, for, again, the cybersecurity people out there, privacy and standards are all a part of this. And we all know that as a country, but, just the opportunity that is being presented here with Huvr, I think, is very consistent with a lot of the solutions. And of course, this IoT agenda in government. Technology is not the problem, folks. It's the digital divide that exists. And let's look beyond the bubble of the Beltway. So shout out of course, Herman, to you there. Are there some other use cases, Herman? We talked about Huvr Africa. Why don't you talk about a few that you're excited about, just to kind of paint that picture?
Yeah, I mean, I was again, I'm a veteran of the Air Force, and so one of the things that I've been looking at is the low numbers that's happening as far as recruiting goes in the military right now. So you've got the Army's down 40+%, the Air Force is down, the Navy's down. And so we have a really good board of directors that consists of former 2- and 3-star generals, admirals, former agency guys. And so, they were able to kind of break through some of the communication walls that can be there. And so we've been pitching the Army, for example, on using Huvr to increase their recruiting numbers. So essentially, it's a modern way of, right now it's the same old where you have recruiters that live in cities, they're in offices, they go to high schools, they put their uniform on, and they tell them, hey, why don't you join the military? But what we can do is we can actually do, let's call it non-secret job description. So if you're a load master and you're trying to fill that position of a load master, what is a load master to a high school student? Well, if you could get on Huvr and you could actually hover into a base live to an actual load master who was putting pallets and securing them and loading them onto a C-145 or something like that, you would actually see that, hey, this is the job that I'm getting ready to sign up for. And so you would get a little more engaged, a little more excited. You could then show your parents, if you wanted to, that particular video and get them excited about it too. And so we're trying to get that pitched, because I really, truly believe we can impact those numbers, those recruiting numbers, in a very short period of time if this is implemented. We then went to, one of the guys started talking about maintenance. And so, I was a part of a maintenance squad when I was in the Air Force for a while before I switched into technology. And, when you have something that's broken on a naval vessel or a major aircraft, and you don't have, right now they have a shortage of maintainers. So they have a shortage of staff that can actually do the work and understand and is an expert in doing that work. So what they end up doing is flying someone in from another base so that they can then repair it. Well, what we can do with Huvr is we can have a remote access that's end-to-end encrypted. Again, it's all secure. That particular person doesn't have to fly, doesn't have to lose time on base, can assist in fixing that particular part. Then that video is now saved so that it can be integrated into technical orders in the future. So when you start to look at strategy and how to use something like this, you really have to put your creative hat on and say, here's one of the problems we're having. Now, how can this piece of software impact that in a positive way? And so that's a couple things we're doing. We also put in some pitches for IG inspections, because I think, when you have to send a team of 13 people around to different bases, and they still have tablets and clipboards, and they're trying to put wartime situation on the people at the base, and then they have to grade them and they're testing them in different ways. You could do all of this from Huvr, and actually, because our platform allows up to 15,000 viewers of a particular event. So if you had 1 or 2 people who were what we call the walkers on the base during the IG inspection, the people at the Pentagon or the people in wherever in any base around the world could actually be logged in securely. They could all hover in to see this inspection going on live, and they could actually inject different scenarios in a live way through the app itself. And then again, they're saving all that. They can then create, edit those videos, put them together for training purposes for the future. And again, it saves a lot of time, it saves a lot of money, but this is just trying to understand like what is actually going on in the military right now, and how can we put those dollars and those hours to better use. And so there's 3 pretty good ones that I think we're starting to work on right now.
Well, number one, we have a question there, and feel free while I riff a minute here, Herman, from a colleague on the chat. I'm bringing this back to what you just brought up with these unique use cases. I think of one, and Sam, you and I've talked a lot about this. Our nation's national laboratories are treasures. These national laboratories are in places in this country that aren't easy to get to. They've been around for many years, and the facilities, the investment in high performance computing, supercomputers, to other facilities where research and development globally convenes researchers and developers to solve a lot of the grand challenges. I've been to 14 of the 17. And man, some you can't get onto that easily, and others you can walk on. Berkeley Lab and places like in Idaho, a little tougher. But the travel, and then once you're there, you see this amazing investment in our country's R&D and the international collaboration that occurs. So that's just something to think about, if you can't make it out, but just to see if you're an entrepreneur or somebody who wants to do, say, a CRADA with a national lab or engage with them, what a great opportunity to see it before you have to go visually see it, or should I say in person. And then the other thing, bringing it back to government, we talk a lot about the digital first customer service experience or data as a strategic asset, Sam. You know that our federal CIO council is very bullish on delivering exceptional customer service for the American public. David, driving key insights in the decision-making process that power intelligent government operations and citizen experiences. This is the humanizing of technology to support mission, to support humanity, if you will. Why are we doing it, and who is it impacting? And I love the use cases, Herman, thank you. So do you want to comment on that question there, Herman, regarding IoT and so forth? Did you have a chance to look at that? Basically, it says, in Italy at the air base, IoT is an unknown. How do you secure what is not known or trained? However, there is no soup to nuts training for government or military. How do we move the work forward? Do you have any feedback on that or some insight?
I could only speak to Huvr itself. I mean, when you're talking about no visibility of IoT, and then you said /security, from our perspective, our platform is definitely end-to-end encrypted. It's definitely secure on what you're collecting. We can have data points that are human to human, that are human to static camera and human to drone. And so those points would absolutely be known. There would be great transparency with the people on the base for using Huvr, and how you can actually take that data. Then that data is secured into a cloud where only people who have permission to access that data, it's accessible at that point. If they wanted to integrate what Scale is doing with AI to make it more usable, they could absolutely do that. But from our perspective, I don't know what's currently going on at the airbase with IoT, but from our perspective, ours is extremely transparent, and you would absolutely know what those devices and have very quick training. It literally takes about 30 to 45 minutes to get up and running with the human-to-human aspect of Huvr Pro. Huvr Pro is our SaaS platform. Huvr is our company name, because we run a gig economy aspect off of it as well. Because there's so many things you can do with Huvr that we want to stay focused on what we do best and let you do what you do best. If that helps.
I love
right,
it.
and to dovetail on that also, because it's kind of a cybersecurity question, and to connect it, Herman, what you said in a legacy use case. When I was a information systems manager, we would issue out a bunch of laptops, right? Those are kind of like sensors across a network, except that a human's controlling each one of them. So for the physical security, we'd rely on users that would sign a user agreement. And then I remember I had a system configuration manager centralized that would secure the application layer, right? Kind of IoT and moving into this zero trust architecture environment. Well, of course, the physical sensors are all across a geographical footprint, but I like how you said it's kind of about securing the data, right? And if you could build parameters to secure the data, then that's really where the meat and potatoes is really at, not necessarily the physical aspect of the solution, right?
Right. And from our perspective, we have the platform that collects the data. We have the platform that will allow you to collect any sort of data you want using our particular modalities of collection. But then you are the one that owns that data. We secure it in a server that only you have access to, a cloud-based server on AC2. But then you have the ability to set your own policies, use that data however you see fit. One of the things that we're doing that might apply to this, we're in talks right now. We're in talks with Deloitte, who works a lot with the government. we're in talks with SOCOM as well, because evidently there's and I remember this when I was in the government as well. There is an annual ISP survey that goes out, and you know, it's kind of a mess right now when you have to go to every base and you have to survey, you know, all of the equipment, like you said, all of the laptops, and you're surveying everything that's out there. And Huvr, we believe, could make that much more efficient. We could collect that data in a much more efficient way, much more timely way, and then that data could be used in a way to improve those systems much quicker. And so, you know, I think it's just little things like that. When we start to talk to agencies and we start to, yeah, I agree, surveys are very arcane. But we could make those surveys, you know, they're not going to go away, I don't think. But we can make those much more efficient using our platform.
So number one, I love the dialogue. It's 11:43. We're conscious of everybody's time. We're going to record this, or we have been recording it, and obviously we're going to get back and push this out in case anybody missed it. I like to close out with some parting shots. You know, Herman, what are some ways people can get in touch with you before we do the parting shots? And I'll start with Sam, and then we'll go to Herman.
You're starting with Sam?
No, I was going to say we're going to do a parting shot where I am, but what? How can people get in touch with you right now? Like, do the website or?
Yeah, I mean, it's better. It's easy if you just go to huvrpro.com.
Okay, I put that out there on the chat.
Put that out there, and then my personal email address is herman@huvr.com. And so feel free to reach out. You know, we have talks with agencies and contracting. We're actually a government approved contractor. We're not on the GSA schedule yet, but we are going to move in that direction. And so, you know, we want to make it as easy as possible for people to use this. And, you know, our goal is to work with you guys to see that, what is that next solution, and let's implement it. Let's help you implement it.
Fantastic. Sam, before we go there, you're going to give us your parting shot. What'd you take away? Herman, you know, what did you take away from some of this and the questions? I do want to give a shout out that on next week, we're going to be at the Executive Leadership Conference in Hershey, Pennsylvania, ACT-IAC, that is. So there's going to be a lot of discussion on a number of technology agenda items. So some of this, I'm sure will present itself. I'll be there on Monday leading a panel on climate. We also have a Friday blockchain and AI meeting that is another group in this wonderful community of ACT-IAC. And Josh at the VA is one of our colleagues who will absolutely drive that discussion. But you could see that there's a cross-pollination here in our working group with those. And please go to ACT-IAC or actiac.gov and check out just a lot of what offers the opportunity to collaborate. But Sam, why don't you go ahead and give us a parting shot?
Yeah, thanks, Pete. I'd like to say first and foremost, thank you, Dr. Herman DeBoard, for sharing with us your passion and how you've applied your passion in the world of IT and IoT specifically. I always say it's great to see how broad and how wide this space is, wide open for folks and companies to dedicate their time, effort in different ways to give back to society. I mean, as Pete says, this is kind of the space of humanity, infrastructure, and technology, right? Where we can bridge those gaps and really meet needs across the board to be more sustainable, more efficient, and effective in the way we do business. Last but not least, I'd like to say, just as Herman kind of threw a shameless plug on getting on the GSA schedule, I'm putting my email into the chat because that's precisely companies like the one that Herman just stood up is precisely the companies we're looking for, right? Innovative companies that can help government do the work of everyday citizens better. And so, Herman, feel free to reach out any way that I can support you in that journey. Be more than happy to do that. But for anyone else who's listening and is going through the same journey and thinks your company has something special that really could contribute to the public and the better good for our nation, we'd be happy to talk to you. So those are my parting shots. Definitely following your passion. We see how it's paid off here with a lot of hard work from Dr. DeBoard. And then secondly, looking at ways that your passion and your skills can contribute to the better good for the public. So as GSA, that's what we're here to do, and just happy to help anyone, including Dr. DeBoard, in doing that. So thank you, Pete, for putting this together. Thanks everyone for participating. And those are my final shots. Pete, back over to you.
You're the man, Sam. I am. And again, folks, Sam is, we didn't read his bio, but just Google Sam, look him up on LinkedIn. He's part of this incredible Centers of Excellence community, but he's a rock star in the government, a true collaborator, served our country as well. So thank you for your service, Sam, on as a civilian now. And you're the man. Love you like a brother, man. Herman, parting shot.
No, I just want to thank everybody for their time. I mean, you'll find that Huvr is just a very easy company to work with. We like to stay small and nimble. We have a fantastic team, and we're willing to work with you. I see some of these comments coming in are fantastic about biometrics and taking it to the next level. And we definitely have that in our vision. And so feel free to reach out. Let's have a conversation. We'll show you some demos. Schedule some time to go over what your issues are and how we might be able to help solve those.
I'll close it out with a big thank you to those who attended, to, of course, Don Lovett and the wonderful folks at ACT-IAC. Herman, it's been a pleasure getting to know you, super fired up to know you and to continue our relationship. I will take this time to say my parting shot is I loved the fact that Huvr is opening the world to everyone. And I'm going to take that home with me. Thank you, everybody who attended. And we look forward to seeing you next month when we bring another celebration of inventiveness and passion to our working group. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. We have the registration link for next month on the chat window. So the next meeting's November 4th, and look forward to seeing you there. We'll talk a little bit about kind of a global perspective on smart cities, smart communities. There's an IEEE working group that's defining some network standards around smart city interconnects. So should be a great session. Thanks so much.
All right. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.